What about frets? How good are they? I was wondering about the accuracy of the claim that fret wire, good fret wire, was about a 2000s variance. So I have a package of fret wire here. It all came out of one package. These were not cheap, they're pre-cut, and of course that makes it a little easier to measure. I have a digital gauge here, I have it at 0, and we'll go through some of these frets. This one here says 47 thousandths. Flip it over. 49.5 thousandths. That's 2.5 thousandths. That's kind of in the ballpark. 48 thousandths. 53. That's 5 thousandths. Is that right? Whoa. 52. Alright, let's measure the other side of it. It can't be right. Okay, so we have 48. 53. That's 5 thousandths in one fret. And we have here 49. 47.5, that's 1.5 thousandths, that's a good one. But they're kind of all over the place, aren't they? 48.5. Well, that's a really good fret. 49.5. 48, not bad. But there's some pretty weird ones in here. We're supposed to go through and measure them all. That's 50 thousandths. 49.5, a good one. The problem is 45.5. Huh. These frets are going to be all over the place. 43. And we've gone from 43 to 55 thousandths? 53 thousandths. Yeah, so we're having 10 thousandths variance, and I'm not going to go through all of these, in one package of frets. That's pretty interesting, and that means you're going to have fulcrum frets on your fretboard when you install these. And I'll talk about those fulcrum frets in a moment. Wow, that was an eye-opener for me. These are top-of-the-line Japanese calipers, digital calipers. I know there's nothing wrong with these. So I'm not so sure about this concept, number one, but I bought these so that I could measure them, because it has that little cut right there where it can actually get to the fret itself instead of the tang, right? So it's going to cause a lot of problems when you install these frets. What's going to happen is, obviously the sanding beam is going to do this, because there's going to be high frets. And then it's going to be high on this side, low on that side, high on that side, low on this side, back and forth, back and forth. And so you say use a sanding beam and you mark the top of the frets with the black ink, and you wait till all the black ink is cleaned off, and oh well, the frets are level. No, they're not. All you did was duplicate bad frets. A close-up view of what happens when you use sanding beams. Completely bulldozes the fret. Destroys the radius this way and the crown that way. It's a nightmare that has to be reconstructed using a file. Now everybody uses freehand files, and let's keep in mind they're not robots. So, you know, are they going to get every single fret exactly the radius to the fretboard? No, they're not going to do that. And is every single fret even going to be the same as the next one? No, it's not going to be. You're going to have random frets going back and forth, and you'll get rid of string buzz, okay, but is that the ultimate goal? Or is the ultimate goal to have symmetrical frets that are nice and level with a beautiful crown that allows you to get the optimized guitar setup to get the smoothest play, the truest intonation, and the longest sustain that the guitar has to offer? So we see But the sanding beam can be very, very destructive. And, you know, using a freehand file, you know, it's guesswork. It's guesswork. It's not precision at all. You know, how much experience and skill have you acquired over the years to do it in an acceptable manner? Okay. There is another way to do things, and it's called Fret Maestro. But before we get into that, what I want to do is I want to show you the fretboard itself. So let's take a look at that. Over time, playing a guitar, the strings will wear into the wood of the fretboard. Like, for example, here, this divot. It's long and it's deep, but it doesn't touch the fret. There's about 1/8 of an inch there. The reason being, the strings come off the fret at an angle, from high to low. And there's no way that we're going to use our fingers pressing a note to squish it right in next to the fret. And so we have that 1/8 of an inch. And that's important, because with Fret Maestro, we only use 1/8 of an inch on either side of the fret. So we go over the top of the fret, and the string wear isn't in the way. But even if it were to be up next to the fret, we see here that Fret Maestro bridges it. It uses the good wood of the fretboard to bridge over the bad wood. It doesn't make any difference how many divots there are in here. There won't be more than 6, right? Now, with the Omni Pro, it's a little bit different. The Omni Pro is a straight file. It's that way because it's made for doing frets on a conical radius fretboard, because every fret is a different radius. And so what it is designed to do with the depth of cut of the file is to follow the fretboard radius. And in this case, that's not going to be an issue. In the very, 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 very rare case that this divot went right up to the fret, we couldn't use the Omni Pro, because there's no way it's going to bridge, because it's straight. So all considered, 99.99% of the time, string wear and finger wear on the fretboard have no bearing whatsoever on how Fret Maestro works. Close up, we see the straight edge on the neck. This neck is perfectly flat. Now, in some cases you may see daylight under here, that's a concave bow. In other cases there'll be a hump, and so the straight edge will rock. We use the truss rod to adjust the neck to make it perfectly flat, supporting it here, not over here. If you support it here, the weight of the guitar will bow the neck. Okay, so always make sure you're up close to the body with the support. If the neck can be made flat, you're good to go for leveling frets. If you cannot make it flat, you need to address that first. On a well-played guitar, we'll see daylight between the frets. That daylight is simply finger wear and string wear, and that wear, as we saw before, does not come closer than 1/8 of an inch from the fret, in which case it will have no influence whatsoever on how Fret Maestro works. Taking a closer look, we'll want to see what's happening right in here on any of the frets. If we see that there's some swelling there, that's from too much humidity. And if we see that the wood is shrinking a bit there, and that's allowing the fret to lift up, that's because it's been dehydrated. In either of those cases, this must be taken care of before leveling frets. The new fret wire, we found one, a 5/1000ths difference on a single fret from one end to the other, and two, a 10/1000ths difference between a random selection of 7 to 8 frets. Without measuring to learn the fret wire disparity, the frets will be installed at random. So it could be something like this, and so what we see here is we have a 10/1000ths variance between two different frets, which we saw when we measured them. Here we have a 5/1000ths variance on a single fret, which we saw when we measured them. We learned that new fret wire is not what we expected. When in this example we have a high fret at the 1st and the 14th, and the frets in between are lower, the sanding beam will find balance on these two frets. The problem is that the beam will be inclined high to low from the 14th to the 1st. The result must be that from the 1st to the 14th frets, the frets will be progressively taller. This is because the sanding beam cannot balance on one fret. Here we see the beam is on top of the 14th fret, and the beam is level in space. And we see the gap between all the other frets. So what has to happen is the beam tilts down and finds a resting point, in this case the 1st fret, and all the other frets in between the 1st and the 14th being lower, we can see the gap, and then following the 14th fret, we see that the gap at the 22nd fret is the maximum gap. So What happens is the tilted beam necessarily sands at the incline. We mark the top of the frets with a Sharpie and sand until the marks on all the frets are gone, and assume then that the frets are nice and level. In this case, the last fret to lose the Sharpie mark is the 22nd, and the result is a total disaster. You see this? And then how short that first fret must be. Fret forensics identified the problem. Now we can identify a solution. The problem we had here was the 14th and the 1st were higher than all the others, but the 14th was higher than the 1st. And that made the sanding beam do this. And the result of that was going to be that the tallest fret would become the last fret. And then the 1st would be the shortest. And instead of just a 5/1000ths difference that we started with, it would be 6 1/4 thousandths difference. So the problem got worse. And the fret rocker going across 3 frets isn't going to show you that, because tall, taller, tallest, it isn't going to rock. You really need a digital gauge to get the big clear picture. Alright, so we have to make the 14th fret and the 1st fret the same. And that way the beam will be level, and we can make all of our frets level. Going this way, not that way. Okay? But there's more to it. We also want the radius of the fret to correspond to the radius of the fretboard. And that's what Fret Maestro does, that this cannot do. This is a freehand guesswork straight file. There is no way to eyeball a perfect radius. This is a 12-inch radius Fret Maestro. This is a 12-inch radius fretboard. And they match. So when you use Fret Maestro, what you're going to get is the perfect radius in relationship to the fretboard radius, which is going to make it possible, and it's the only way to make it possible, to get the ultimate guitar setup, which then of course is going to give you the best play, the best intonation, and the best sustain that that guitar has to offer. So it's pretty straightforward. There are other circumstances, this guitar being one of them. In this case, the fulcrum fret was ignored. All the frets were progressively taller and then progressively lower. And so now there are not 2 frets far enough apart that are close enough in height to adjust one fret to create a balance. So the solution I've come up with. This is PET film. It is 5/1000ths of an inch gauge. The backing has a grid, so when you fold it over, you can cut 2 strips at once, save some time. Prescribed on the back, that's what we do. We make them 2.5 inches and prescribe them on the back, so it's easy to peel when you cut the little strips off. Otherwise, you know, really a hassle. If the 14th fret is 50/1000ths, each layer of this is 5/1000ths, so that would be 10 layers. So we got 10 layers here, and I've got another stack of these somewhere. Here we go. And say 10 layers here. Far enough apart for the beam to balance. And it breaches all of those bad frets, you know. And then we take them all down to the lowest fret. Now the lowest fret is going to be the first one in this case. So we can mark the top of that with a Sharpie, maybe the second one as well. Go overboard, mark the third, but we don't need to mark the rest of them, okay? Because we now have our risers that are making sure that we're sanding level. Now when we see the Sharpie mark come off these frets, we know we're there. So that's pretty cool. And then we finish with Fret Maestro, because that's going to give us the perfect radius. Every fret is going to be the same height, and the crowns are all going to be uniform at the same time. And that is not possible with this. Okay? Not going to happen. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you where you can get these things on your own. You don't have to buy them from us. We don't even sell these. And so we've done the shopping for you, show you where to get those, and then come back and give you the details about how to use Fret Maestro. SixStringers.com. At the top of the page, we see How To. I'm going to click on How To, and that brings us to the How To page, where we will find where to download the Fret Forensic Worksheet and a How To in text. And down here are links, shopping links, to various things that you may want to have when you're doing your fret leveling. And these are the best prices. For example, the digital gauge, the price went up to $65.99, but that's still less than $128 from a very expensive seller elsewhere. You know, SixStringers neither makes nor sells sanding beams. So why do I spend so much time talking about sanding beams? The simple answer to that is sometimes it's useful to save time. You know, if there's a lot of filing to be done, for example, there are divots in this fret. And to get those divots out, we're taking off, say for example, 6/1000 of an inch. Well, that means we have to take 6/1000 off of every fret. There's 22 frets in this guitar. That's going to take some time. And I can cut that time in half if I pre-level with the beam using the techniques that I showed. And by using those techniques, maintaining the radius of the fret. A lot of people talk about, you know, they say, oh, this is the fret crowning file. Nobody talks about the radius. It's all about the crown, which is this way. Okay, that's important. But what about this way, which is the radius? Shouldn't they be uniform? Should they be lopsided from one side to the other and alternating from fret to fret to fret to fret and walking up and down the fretboard? Nobody talks about that. They just say crowning. Presumably, they're dealing with the radius at the same time, but of course, that's freehand. And you can't eyeball that. I mean, I can't see 3,000 difference just by looking at it. All right. So, I still don't think these are the modern day tool. These sanding beams certainly, I found, used in a certain way, can be beneficial. Time savers. Fret Maestro is going to make sure that everything turns out symmetrically, precision. Okay. Metal box. The radius of the Fret Maestro is engraved in the box, so if you have a few of them, and many customers do, you don't have to open the box to see what it is. So what's inside? Well, the first thing that pops out is a sheet of glide strip. Then we have the fret height gauge, the pin for removing the file, 2 files in slots, 1 file in the Maestro. And we'll get these out of here. This is a 12-inch radius Fret Maestro that goes with this 12-inch radius fretboard. Removing the file is the first thing I'll talk about. We see slots, like so. And we'll pull the file out. So the 3 files. One is the 150 grit file, diamond. That's for the heavy lifting. Another one is the 240 grit V file. It's shaped like a V, so it doesn't have a radius in there like the other two do. So it doesn't cut off the top of the fret. All it does is narrow the top of the fret. Because as we saw, if we're to use a sanding beam, we're making the tops of the fret flat and wider. Because the further you go down, the wider the fret gets, because the frets do go like this, yeah? And so this will recover the crown narrow that you want, so that you have the same play and intonation that you like. And then the 300 file is to smooth everything out. It's not to be used as a leveling file. I know that most files out there that are diamond files are 300. Really not good enough to do leveling work. And I don't even think radius and crown work. I think you need the 150 to speed things up a little bit. And then putting a file into the Fret Maestro. I'm going to use the, need my glasses, I can't see. Alrighty. There we go. I like to start with the crown narrowing file. And the reason is, now let's put this guy in here. Pop it into the slot. Dial the depth of cut. There are 12 positions here from 0 to 11. They are in 0.003 of an inch increment. So very high precision. Press with your thumb and rotate the dial. Make sure the dial is not moving and the file is seated on the proper number. The numbers must match. That's for sure. And then the glide strip, as you saw before, you just cut strips off of it, and when you put the glide strip on, allow a little space between the strip and the fret, gives a place for the debris to go. And the glide strip being 0.005 of an inch. And narrow the crown. Now, you could mark the top, and probably should mark the top with a Sharpie, so it's probably a good idea to have a Sharpie. And you can see how that line is narrowing. Now, this fret has basically been done, but you can feel it. Actually, I can feel we're doing a little bit of work here. If the crown isn't narrow enough for you, you can always go to the next setting. In this case, that would be number 4. And that's going to help narrow the crown some more. You know, ideally, my posture should be like this. And when you hold the Fret Maestro, the heel of your palm, thumb here, not on the dials, finger over the top, and then when you're over the top of it like this, it's a lot easier to see that you're going straight. Because as is true with all files, you could go and torque it one way or the other, in which case you're going to cut into the side of the fret. And, you know, that's going to scar the fret. It may not ruin it, but it'll have a scar. You know, you have to catch yourself. So you want to go straight. You let the file do the work. All right. Then I'd switch to the 150. 150, each one of these have the radius stamped on it, so these are 12. And the 150 has the radius plus a star. So that's the 150. The crowning file is the radius plus a C, C meaning crown. And the 300 file is just the radius, no symbol. Now I'll go back to 3, because that's the actual depth that we're leveling these frets at, not number 4. I just did that for the narrowing of the crown. So in between, make sure you know where you're at. So number 3, you can mark the top with a Sharpie again and see what you're doing. Now, this fret is not a lot to do there. And normally I would go back to the crown narrowing file, but I didn't do much here, and finish it off. But instead, I'll skip that step and go with the 300 file. So again, making sure it's on number 3, not number 2 or 4 or someplace else, and seating the file so that the dial does not move. Okay. And this, we bottom out the Fret Maestro. Now, files can clog, and so there's file care. Diamond files, I've read a lot of your reviews and so forth on diamond files, and people saying, oh, you know, I got dull and blah, 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 it's not very good quality, so forth, so on. The diamond file, and today they're all nickel occluded. They're not glued on, they're plated on. And it's all pretty much the same process of electrolysis. So it's not so much that the diamond file is no good, it's that if you press in and you soft nickel starts backfilling the diamond grit, it'll act dull. But that nickel isn't going to break diamond, and it isn't going to rip any diamond out of the occlusion either. However, a stainless steel fret, much harder than nickel. And it's nickel that keeps the diamond to the steel substrate of the file. So if you push down and just dig into that stainless steel, you've created a tug-of-war. And the stainless steel is going to win versus the nickel that's holding in the diamond grit. And it's going to pull the grit out of the file. Let the weight of the file do the work. And the other thing you can do, and you should do, is you should clean your file. Now this is a belt center eraser. There's a link on the website where you can find this. And it's great for cleaning the file. There is a caveat. Sometimes they get, after use and sitting around, kind of gummy. Yeah, you don't use that. Make sure it's not gummy or sticky. Okay? And the other thing you can do is use dry lube on the file, and that'll help release the debris from the file. And so whether it's a Fret Maestro diamond file or any other diamond file, this is the way to care for them and the way to use them. And you'll notice when you clean the file, it'll instantly behave differently. You will be able to feel it cutting again instead of pushing debris. And that's important with a Fret Maestro file because we're getting pretty much full file to fret contact that you cannot get with a straight file. A straight file on a radius only has a very small contact point. Okay? And a toothbrush. Clean the debris out. Okay, I can feel this guy is a little bit of resistance still. The thing is, you have to bottom out. When you bottom out the Maestro, what you know is that you've hit the setting and the height for the setting to the fret. Alright, and that's really important. And if you don't bottom it out and you kind of go random from fret to fret to fret, of course your frets are going to be different height. That doesn't mean you ruin the frets. It just means you have to go back and finish it with the same setting. Just finish it. Follow through, you know. Now I forgot to mention this tool here. How do we know what setting to use? This has 0 to 11, the same way that Fret Maestro has 0 to 11. These are notched out. Now I know I'm going to go to number 4 here. And what I'm looking for, I'll hold it down here, not up here. It's really hard to know what's going on. You got to hold it down here. Now you can see it's rocking. So 4 is kind of deep. So try number 3. Oh, that's number 5. Number 3 isn't rocking, but I can feel contact. So I'll definitely start with number 3, and if I have to, walk it into number 4. You know, and I won't know that till I go after it. If you have divots and frets, instead of measuring for the lowest fret, which is what we're looking for using this tool, we start with the divots and clear those divots out. And whatever setting it took to do that, we will use on all other frets. The result is going to be, this is a 12-inch radius fretboard. That's going to be a 12-inch radius fret, with the exception of it having a higher circumference because it's taller than the fretboard. But The relationship is consistent. The crowns are all going to be done at the same time because the file also has a radius going this way. So it's the compound radius file, just like the fret. The height is all going to be the same from fret to fret to fret to fret. In other words, perfect symmetry. As you saw before, the fretboard has no influence on that unless you have that weird exception to where you have, lifted fret slots that are either moisture expanded or dehydrated and shrunk. In which case, like I said before, you need to handle that first. So Fret Maestro is really easy to use. It's made for the rest of us. And I mean everybody that's not a professional. You want to do it at home, you want to do it yourself, you don't want to pay a shop, and you want to know you're going to get it right. You're not going to mess things up. And you don't have to develop any special skills or have any prior experience to get it done right. That's Fret Maestro.